Good people of Moralton and YouTube, we have heard your cries for justice. It is finally time to acknowledge the crimes of the 6-inch-tall menace who walks among us, Orel Puppington. Yes, Orel Puppington. Too long have you been protected by your father's status as mayor of your town, but he can't protect you from our judgment, or the judgment of the people who comment on our videos. That's right. We broke down Orel Puppington's criminal charges, and the verdict will not surprise you.
To start with, we needed to figure out which state laws and penalties to go by. Because state of soda is somewhere between Kansas and Missouri, we flipped a coin and decided to go with Kansas. We're trying him as an adult because it's funnier.
Just as a disclaimer, none of us have any background in law, and if we get anything wrong, we really don't care. After a thorough viewing of the series and an arduous count of his crimes, we find Orel Puppington guilty of 1 count of attempted premeditated murder in Beforal Orel, the penalty for which is life with the possibility of parole after 50 years.
He's only at the beginning of his life, and he's already got life in prison.
1 count of voluntary manslaughter, for which the penalty is 10 years in jail.
3 counts of involuntary manslaughter, for which the penalty is 31 to 172 months in jail per count. 6 counts of rape, as well as forced insemination with an apparatus, for which the penalty is up to 12 months in jail per count.
Who does that? 6 counts of breaking and entering, up to 6 months in jail per count. 9 counts of assault and battery, which would lead to 34 to 172 months in jail per count.
Okay, this one was worth it. 2 counts of theft, a fine of $2,500 or up to 12 months in jail per count. 10 counts of destruction of property, for which the penalty is 5 to 7 years in jail per count.
10 counts of sale of a misleading product, for which the penalty is $20,000 per violation and fines. 1 count of false advertising, for which the penalty is $20,000 per violation and fines.
3 counts of reckless endangerment via incitement to hate, which would lead to 5 to 90 days in jail per count. Grow brought back segregation. 3 counts of sex trafficking, which would lead to up to 22 years in jail per count.
5 counts of underage drinking, for which the penalty is 40 hours of community service per count. 5 counts of public intoxication, for which the penalty is 6 months in jail per count. 1 count of indecent solicitation of a minor for sex, for which the penalty is 31 to 136 months in jail. For shame, Orel.
4 counts of grievous bodily harm, for which the penalty is up to 10 years incarceration per count.
1 count of illegal drug possession and use, which leads to 10 to 24 months in jail.
1 count of animal cruelty, for which the penalty is 5 days to 12 months in jail.
1 count of extortion, for which the penalty is up to 3 years jail time.
1 count of defamation, which leads to up to 12 months in jail.
1 invasion of privacy, up to 12 months in jail.
1 count of hate-motivated violent crime, for which the penalty is up to 2 years in jail.
1 count of carrying a loaded weapon on school premises, which leads to up to 180 days in jail.
For these crimes, and perhaps others that we have yet to know of, Orel Puppington has been sentenced to 218 years in prison.
$225,000 in a total sum of fines.
And 200 days in community service.
Plus life in jail with no hope of parole. That's right, no parole!
This is just too much, guys. Let's skip all of that and just give him the electric chair. Bye, Orel.
Hey guys, welcome to the 3rd episode of Moralton University. I'm Senna, and I'm joined by Wes and Lauren.
We're gonna talk about why, when we analyze the show, we want to avoid sensationalizing it, which I think has been a bit of a trend with the discourse that's been about the show out there so far.
We also want to get into why it's detrimental to your understanding of the show to try to assign roles of good or evil or hero or villain to the characters. So enjoy our analysis.
When doing a critical analysis of a satirical show, you cannot take what happens in it too seriously. Everything in it is meant to comment on our own reality and say something about our blind spots, about the things we are embarrassed to admit or scared to look at. Moral Orel does a good job of commenting on these things. When we reduce the conversation about it to a show that's going too far or too dark for television, we do it a disservice as a work of art and fail to engage with the way it was meant to be engaged with.
One of the show's other strengths was portraying truly complicated and layered characters who were grappling realistically with the challenges of existing in the confines of their world. These are characters who have children and don't know how to raise said children. They're looking for love, they have obsessions, they're in the closet, they recreate traumatic situations to try and regain control over them. They're all deeply human as opposed to the expected plasticity of traditional values they're expected to uphold. They're hypocrites, but that may actually be their saving grace. Their flaws, their sins, are what we enjoy about them.
It's moot to argue about whether characters are good or evil in the show when the whole system is the problem. They were born and raised in the problem, and they live and breathe it. A broken system of belief will only produce broken followers who fake as they go. This goes for all systems. Educational censorship, compulsory heterosexual marriage, a belief that God favors you over others, performance of religious conviction in public. Everyone perpetuates it, but is simultaneously a victim of it.
In conclusion, the real evil in the show is hypocrisy, lies, and laziness.
The whole show is a satire from start to finish. So there isn't like a cutting point where it stops being something that is social commentary and suddenly becomes this dramatic story about like a family drama. It, throughout it, it's a satire. It's a satire start to finish. It's commenting on things start to finish. Even when it's not being funny, it's still commenting on the world. And when we over sensationalize what happens in it, we're missing the point of what it's trying to say.
Here's where I guess maybe my little turtle brain is having a hard time understanding. So when you're saying what is the difference between sensationalizing it and taking what's on screen being serious?
What I feel, a lot of the ways people talk about the show, they go in saying, this is the show that went too far and Adult Swim had to cancel. It was too dark for television. It was, all these things that it makes people scared to watch the show.
Yeah, I think if you talk about it that way, it does give that impression, like, oh, this is so traumatizing. Like, how are we going to get through it?
But that's the thing. It's a puppet show. This is a show that's in stop motion animation, and something about it being in that medium, it makes it easier to watch it happen. And people aren't getting that when people discuss it like it's too dark for television. It's not too dark for television. Some executives decided that it was, and it just makes it so that it's harder to look at what's happening on the show as something that happens in reality and really, think about reality in that sense.
Yeah, and really at the end of the day, what they really did was they decided it was too dark for their network. They didn't want that kind of stuff on their network. Like, I'm sure, we already know that you can see that kind of stuff in television now, like, being told more genuinely.
This was something we did discuss in our first episode, where we talked about how they show that sort of storyline in Tuca and Birdie. Honestly, one thing that I hadn't seen ever shown on television was seeing a closeted person in a marriage that they can't leave, who's, who feels deeply violated and hates the marriage they're in, but still can't leave. So I feel like that was a really interesting character point that people didn't really pick up on. People didn't really notice it.
No, I think when people sensationalize the show, a lot of those more emotional, like complex beats that it has, it just gets lost in the mix. Like people get so caught up in this crazy thing happens, this really dark traumatizing thing happens in this episode, and all of those more human aspects get lost when people look at it that way.
Yeah, it's like, everyone says, oh, the guy, his dad shot him, but they don't consider what led up to that point and why that might have happened and what that says about their whole social scene, that they got out of it and no one really came after him for it.
Yeah, and I mean, I also think that when you completely break nature down to, oh, Clay shot Orel, it's like you don't really feel the buildup of what just happened beforehand and why we're even hearing what we're hearing, because it's so like raw and it's so emotional, that I think people tend to focus on the, oh my god, child endangerment, child abuse, this is that, instead of like what exactly was going on in that situation, if that makes sense.
That does make sense. And yeah, I agree. People, when they think about nature, they're like, oh, that's the episode where Orel's dad shoots him, and that's really all they remember from it. But
what it is
layered than that.
Where it's the episode where Orel's dad just drinks and drinks and cannot stop, and then has a psychotic break and goes on this borderline emotionally incestuous rant towards his son about hating women and not enjoying sex with women. And there's a lot going on in there that people, they kind of gloss over and just focus on what ended up happening.
I think that with the culmination of that rant being, Clay shooting Orel, that happens, and then all of the nuance of the rant, it is lost on people. All they can focus on is like the anger and the fear, and how it must have looked from Orel's perspective. And like, while that's important, there's two people involved in this, and Clay's more complex emotions are drowned out by the severity of his action.
Yeah, and I also think that it's notable that that's like the first episode where the alcoholism is taken like deadly serious in that moment, and I think people don't always like recognize that either. I feel like it's too shocking or whatever, so they just kind of like brush it aside in favor of, okay, well, this is like a horrible situation, or was obviously in a horrible situation, and then he gets shot, and it's like, yeah, that's horrible, but like there's two people suffering at the same time. There's basically two people who are in peril in this situation, and like it's coming out in a really negative way, obviously, and it's coming out in a lot of anger, but like if you listen closely, you see what's really going on there.
Yeah, and I think the rawness of how Clay's alcoholism is portrayed in that moment makes people really uncomfortable, because up until that point, Clay's drinking, like, obviously it's a big deal, and it does, affect how he acts. Like, it's a huge part of his character, but there's this level of comedy to it. Like, he makes jokes about, like, you're not supposed to do this until I've had my third highball, like, stuff like that. But then in nature, it's like, this isn't funny anymore. There's no humor to take the edge off of it. It's like, this is very serious, and it has like almost deadly consequences. And I think that really puts people off.
Even when it's not funny anymore, it's still satire. It's still, saying something about like where these characters are in their world and how they're reacting to it. And I think that's, something people don't, they can't really wrap their heads around it, for it to be both a social commentary and this gripping sort of drama.
And I think for a lot of people, like their kind of go-to way of reacting to it is to just sensationalize it. That's really all they can think to do with it.
Wow, this is the show where the kid got shot by his dad.
Yeah, I mean, even an 8-year-old was able to tell me that.
Yeah.
Like, that's how people talk about the show. That is why, because in the main media, like, depictions of the shows on, like, in fandom space, it is that's how it's like, these are the worst parents ever, and their children are constantly in danger, and there's so much child abuse going on in this show, and the dad shoots his kid. It's that kind of thing.
When people sensationalize it like that, they lose sight of that. Even though this is a satire, so things are handled in this very like sort of extreme fashion. The things that are being portrayed here are things that real people experience, and people, I think, lose their like compassion for people that are going through this in real life when they sensationalize it like that.
We got a lot of really great comments on our last video about how people relate to Bendy's situation in the show and how it was really the most realistic portrayal that they'd seen of a survivor of child sexual assault. So, you know, I've seen people break down Bendy's scene and react to it by, you know, they say, oh, you know, it turns out the nurse is crazy and she plays dolls and then has a nervous breakdown.
Oh God, I've never seen that, but that sounds horrible.
I saw that in, I don't know, it was some kind of iceberg video.
Damn, like, I can't believe someone even respond to it that way and have that kind of comment. That sounds so...
I mean, there's a lot of people who kind of jump on responding to it without trying to think about it. And instead they're just like, you know, going, you know, trying to rattle off as many facts as they can about it. Everything in it, you know, it needs to be taken piece by piece and, you know, just let it sink in. Like, where do you see that in the world? Where have you seen that in today's politics?
At the core of satire is a commentary on reality. None of it is just based in like this absurdist fantasy. Like, it's very, very real and very relatable. And I think it is easier for people to cope with that if they just treat it like this, whoa, like, can you believe that this happens sort of thing.
It is really like hard to talk about like alone, obviously, because of how like realistic the depictions are, and I know that we went over that a lot, or you guys went over that a lot in the last video.
The thing with Orel is that there's like a weird disconnect where he's done all these awful things, and then, you know, when people want to discuss the characters in the show, they want to put them on the scale of good to evil and say that Orel is actually the most good person in the show because of this, this, and this, even though he did all these things. And that the other characters in the show, you know, they're actually the bad guys in his life and they're evil. And it, you know, they're swimming in the system. They're little fishes who don't know that they're in toxic waters. And it's kind of like this constant argument that I've seen where everyone tries to figure out whether Clay or Blaberta is the worst parent.
That's something we can talk about at gross length. Like, it... Because it really, truly what that boils down to is I like so-and-so better. So I want to feel better about myself by liking the person who's less morally corrupt. When in reality, if you take away like the really sensationalized parts of the story, like Clay shooting Orel, they are very equivalent in how badly they treat their children. They're both dismissive of them. They're both, you know, like Clay uses the whole corporal punishment thing. I mean, Blaberta doesn't always want to even like speak to them, period. I mean, there's things that you see on both sides. Like they don't know what they're doing. They don't know how to be good parents, and that's kind of like the point of them, I guess, in a way. But it's like if you try to break things down to like, all right, I'm gonna have a checklist, and Clay did this, and that, but he did this to so and so, and then, you know, it's like really what it boils down to, especially in the Clay versus Blaberta thing, is just like. Quite obviously, Clay and Blaberta are kind of like their own antagonists of each other because of the actions that they did to one another. But really, at the end of the day, like, the fact that they got together at all is like the big problem that causes all these issues between them.
The marriage is the villain.
Exactly.
The marriage is the bad guy in the room, and they're trapped in it. It's the institution. It's the social niceties and being forced to keep these appearances up, and they buy into it completely.
I mean, it's like that's the society they were brought up in. I mean, like, you make one bad decision, you're stuck with someone for the rest of your life, and you can't do anything about it. I mean, Clay talks about it in Sacrifice Rate. You can't go anywhere, you're stuck, you can't be anyone, stuff like that. I mean, it's clear how much the union is like hurting them as people and making them worse people on the outside, but they still stay together despite that because of the society that they grew up in.
Yeah, it's like their marriage is like this. It's like this thing that's like rotting, and everything around it is gonna rot with it, and like their children are gonna suffer because of this marriage. They can't flourish in their marriage. They can't succeed in their marriage. They can't feel happy in their marriage. So how are they possibly gonna raise children that are healthy and happy and, you know, have these good, well-adjusted relationships?
When you have these really sensationalized view of certain characters, then you have people like really downplaying what other characters do. Like I think both Danielle and Putty get downplayed a lot.
They do, yeah.
They're okay. Look, both of these guys suck.
Everybody in Moral Orel is like a shit person. Like we, like they're all racist. They're all
because you know they're swimming in the shit. They're swimming in this awful society.
Yeah, I mean they're closed-minded people. Like they're racist. They're homophobic. You know, like they can't help but be any way other than that because that's what they grew up in. I mean, even someone like Clay, who you know, he has closeted homosexuality, he still has also you know, he says homophobic shit all the time, like because that's the society he grew up in.
I think something that's really important to consider when watching Moral Orel and shows like it is the difference between an antagonist and a villain. And I think people like to use the word villain when they're looking at the characters that do bad things. Like people say Clay is the villain of the show, or Bluebird is the villain of the show. Like, you know, whoever like their most hated is, whoever the target is of their like judgment, you know, who's the worst. But, yes, we can get into that. Like Censor does like the real villain, but like Clay is like an antagonist to Orel. Bluebird is like an antagonist to Orel because Orel's the protagonist, but like they're not evil. They're not like these super villains that are like they're antagonists. They cause problems for him. They present these obstacles for him.
If you could go so far as to say that Putty is an antagonist to Orel, especially in God Chef.
Yeah. Okay. It's like you know, this isn't some freaking anime where there's like Orel's the protag and he's going to like fight all the villains in his life and it's like everybody in his community. Like you know, it's just a story about people.
Someone once said, like in a comment, not on YouTube, someone said that Orel was too good for his rotten town and family, and I thought, no, he's not.
He's a product of it.
Exactly what they make him to be.
Yeah, exactly. And it's like, yeah, he might be, but he's a child. He's full of innocence. Like we don't know, you know, how like we see Orel as a well-adjusted person at the end of the show, but that doesn't mean that he's just suddenly healed and fixed. Like a little off topic, but like
I mean, yeah, it was a real disservice to cancel the show and then plug that at the end.
Yeah.
Literally. I think that also makes people confused. I think that also actually that's a great point because like they see that and they go, Orel beat them. He's not like them.
Yeah. I want to say like, you know, people are like, you know, Orel's too good for Moralton. Orel is so good and so pure. And like, yes, he's innocent, he's a child, but like, you know, people look at Clay and they're like, that's the most evil man to ever exist. And it's like, well, you know, think about Clay when he was a child and passing. Look how innocent he was. Look how sweet he was. Like he wasn't bad. He wasn't evil. He caused something really awful to happen by accident. You know, he's a naive child. He did something that led to his mom dying, but how is that any different from something Orel does? On an episodely basis. Yeah,
I mean, he pulled a stupid prank. Like, it was a prank gone wrong, you know?
He got a little heated and selfish for a moment and thought he'd mess with his mom, and it backfired on him, and that doesn't mean that he was evil as a child. And so it doesn't mean that Orel as a child is, like, you know, it's the Christian concept of love the sinner and hate the sin. People are inherently evil. People, you know, they do bad things, but it doesn't mean that, you know, that's the core of them.
Yeah, it's like these people do bad things that affect one another. They make decisions that are, like, you really think sorry. Like, when you boil down to it, it's like, you know, why are these two characters in this situation that we're in? Like, why does Orel have to have these horrible parents? Because they made a fucking stupid decision. Like, anybody could have backed out at any time, but they did it anyway. Like, there was, you know, everything was shouting red flags from the rooftops. Like, I know all of us were banging on the church walls.
Socially, like, socially, they were doing the right thing. Socially, they did what was expected of them, and, you know, that's the problem.
Yeah, and it's like, we would never know what would happen if that didn't happen. Would they be more healthy? Probably not. They would probably have other problems that would cause them in their lives. That's a speculation thing, but like, it's just like the society itself is this problem. You know, women are growing up thinking that they need to marry men to be something, to have any kind of value. This is why we get the situation where, you know, someone who's an outcast, I don't want to say the word outcast so seriously, but someone who's not, who doesn't have high social standings, like someone like Roberta, is going to be like, okay, yes, I need to find a husband right now because I don't have a fucking purpose. And it's like, everything is wrong from every angle in this society. And this is why we're dealing with these characters as they are in the series proper, because, you know, they've dealt with all this.
Think about it even without the Christianity. How many people in the world are just like, you know, still doing things like that, even if they're not like dealing with Christian pressures? You'd be surprised a lot.
Yeah.
So there's
like a certain set of expectations that are just kind of like the standard, like even outside of Christianity, like there's definitely this expectation of like, you grow up, you get married, you have kids. And so like, regardless of the religion element, like for someone like Roberta, she needs to get out of her parents' house. Like, she's not someone who's going to go to college or get some kind of job and like find independence that way. No, she's going to get out of her mom's house by marrying a man. And because she doesn't have any prospects, she's like, oh, here's a handsome single man, I'm going to get him to marry me.
Found the
and
one.
It's a horrible idea.
He found the one single guy.
Circling back to Clay, you know, with him, him being like this villainized character as an adult, and then him being this, you know, very naive child. Like, there's things that happen between that, like him being that child and him being the adult we see.
I've heard people, like, I saw a comment once on Passing where someone was like, that was the moment where he turned evil, where his mom told him about the miscarriages. He became evil right there. Like, suddenly a flip switches in your head and you become like the spawn of Satan. Just because, like, chill.
Like no, it's like he's a child who lost his mother very suddenly, and his father shuns him because of it. He's neglected. He's alone. His father hates him. He's gonna grow up with like this warped like mentality and sense of self because of it, and that's going to impact him going into adulthood and how he deals with Orel. And everything is like, it's a cycle. Like, there's, you know, generational traumas, cycles of abuse, and like to just say Clay is the most evil character in the show, he's a monster, he's a villain, like that completely like dismisses all of the things that led him to this point.
We had a fantastic comment on our last video, which was in reply to another comment. So they say, we often want to say it's not an excuse for, because people then start to see the chain. Everyone is a product of their environment, and the magical age of 18 doesn't absolve people of their genetic propensity and conditioning up till then, yet we still place responsibility on it. The issue is, like I said, it's a chain. Abuse begets abuse. Most abusers were abused. Where does the blame lie? We want someone to take the punishment. It's a lot about how our laws and social structure works. Even though I attest it's a useless vengeance-based endeavor, and justice is actually removing or at least trying to alleviate the root cause of the chain itself, which we do not do at all. The second is, if you're abused, even if it's not your fault, you're still the product of those consequences, and your future actions are still something you have to live with. Thinking about the abuse chain and the idea that the genetics and environment are not in someone's control and both play a part in how anyone turns out, well, it makes us question the entire social and law-based structure we work with, which opens a can of worms. For me, I don't think free will ever make sense, but for lots of people, it's not even a question. So leading down the blame path causes us to have to ask, well, then whose fault it is, but not what caused a person to do X or Y in the first place. We focus on the actions, not the chain reactions that drove it in the first place, which is why we never solve the issue. We just think people suddenly do terrible things because they feel like it. It's a simple way to try to find a solution to a deep-seated complex issue. It also feels invalidating to people who are victims, which I pointed out is usually the abuser too, but that makes things too muddy, too confusing, and too irresolute for society to try to parse. I'm saying all this as a person who has both been sexually abused and abused for 2 decades by my mother, mentally and physically. Learning that my abusers have their own issues and also is mentally very unhealthy, and it contributed to the chain reaction of the things they did. If anything, I'm mad at society for refusing to see the chain. It shouldn't be a blame game. It should be a call to stop producing environments that make people into monsters. And even if I feel sympathy for it not being a choice, it also doesn't stop the very real damage someone who is themselves damaged can cause. Someone can be a victim and also a problem. My mother is one such figure. She's too dangerous to really be allowed to just be in society as is. Even if it's not her fault that she is the way she is, that doesn't mean that she gets a free pass to do whatever. The goal then becomes, how can we protect people who are being hurt, even if they're both hurting and hurt? And what can we do to assure that it doesn't happen anywhere near as much? She should be kept from others, not because of vengeance, not justice, but simply because she and her condition is a threat to other people's well-being. Even if it's not their life, it's their life quality. Her actions worsen their lives as it did to mine, and that has lasting effects. People often assume that if we can admit at least some abusers were also victims who couldn't face the truth of their abuse or were unable to seek help or never even realize that they were abused, then they get a free pass. They don't, because actions still matter, but the intent isn't punishment. It's just to protect those they can and often will hurt, and assess if there's anything we can do for them to make them more adjusted as people or not. We don't do this, so Orel is to blame just as much as his father rather than. There is no specific person to blame because no one is in a vacuum, no one is an island. Everything is cause and effect, and we all suffer for it when we deny that and wonder why we can't fix it.
That was a great comment.
Yeah, thank you to the person who wrote that. That was really, really good.
Thank you so much. This is a very rewarding project because we get to hear takes from people like you who have very insightful things to say on the matter.
Yeah, and they're, we've talked about it already, but they're very correct that, things don't exist in a vacuum. And part of the problem is this societal structure that does nothing to stop, that chain reaction and abuse from continuing to cycle. And, I think with Orel, a lot of people fail to notice that the role that the other townspeople play, or that their very toxic fundamentalist environment plays in the abuse that happens. That gets downplayed and it becomes more of a targeted, Clay is evil, Blabert is evil, whoever they're targeting, it's this specific person, in that vacuum.
In a sense, I think is a good example of that because, instead of deciding that they should really reconsider what they're saying to Orel, they just say, stop saying anything to him.
Yeah.
As if that's somehow going to raise him better than, actually talking to him.
Well, yeah, they don't know how to address their own flaws. How are they going to know how to talk to this kid, who sees everything so literally?
Yeah. And it's such a huge moment for all these characters when they're hearing this. Potter's Wheel says, maybe they're not giving good advice, and Putty's maybe Dr. Potter's Wheel's right, and then everyone gasps. It's maybe we don't know what we're talking about. Oh no, that can't be it. And then people are saying, Clay needs to, take more responsibility for his son, and he's I'm not even responsible for what I do 90% of the time. And so why don't you stop drinking? What if? And then we get things from Danielle and Sculptum, and they're
we're the school teachers. We're not really in charge of him. We just educate, but they're just as culpable for his actions. And that's what the episode illustrates. Everybody in that room who's not giving him proper guidance, who's too lazy to give him proper guidance and was never given proper guidance themselves, they can't give him anything good.
Yeah, they're so at a loss. When they realize that the things they've been saying haven't been helping, so their solution is just, well, we're not going to give him any advice at all. they're floundering. They have no idea what to do. They're like, Orel goes to Putty and then sculpts them, and the Christines, and then Danielle, and it's like none of them really.
I love that.
I
love that you went to the Christines, because then it's like it's not even just a Christian thing. You could go to anyone, and if they don't know what to tell you, they don't know what to tell you.
Yeah, it's like none of them really know how to confront that they're the problem, and this like societal structure that they're upholding is what's breeding Orel's like bad behavior. They can't face that.
Yeah.
So when in innocence, like we see the negative consequences of that.
Yeah, it's just a fundamentally flawed society, and they, they don't know how to break free from it anyway. So they're just kind of living in it, and they're kind of doing what they can to just avoid telling him what to do, because it's
the desire to find like a villain and someone to point fingers at, because you could say the villain is Putty because he's a reverend who doesn't believe half the things he says, and most of his bullshit causes more problems than it solves, and he's respected, and for someone who's bullshitting half the time, he shouldn't be that respected. Or you could say like the gym coach is literally like this sociopath who does not care who he hurts, and he caused the problem in their marriage, which eventually led to this, which eventually led to that, and he should have just not done that, and he's actually the villain of the show.
And both of those characters, like we mentioned earlier, like a lot of the fandom likes to give a pass, like because those two characters towards the end of the show, in season 3, we start to see them changing a bit in a more positive direction, and because of that, people tend to minimize the damage that they've done
as well. Like that was, their character development was happening maybe in the timeline where it should have been happening, but what would have probably happened with the Puppington family didn't end up happening. So it makes it look like the Puppingtons were just destined to be assholes and never change or never have any development.
And that's why it's frustrating when people go, "Oh, Orel should have been raised by Putty. Orel should have Stephanie and Putty in his family."
Orel? Get away from Orel.
Yeah, okay, let's not kid ourselves here. Like, we all love the Reverend, but he's not. I don't think
Stephanie's
he's
not
qualified.
Raise him. She's an independent single girl who's running her business, and she doesn't actually really want kids.
Yeah, she doesn't want to be a mom. She tells him that. And it's like, you see people, so you see people, you see characters, it's like people see characters interact positively with the character, and then it's like, oh shit, they must be the good guy, because they're not going out of their way to antagonize, but it's like, it's not like Putty doesn't lead Orel astray, like, all the time, too. It's not like he doesn't do shitty things, like, it's... we could argue about that back and forth all day, but it's like, at the end of the day, like, everybody's got their problems, and everybody's got, their flaws.
People forget that there was a time where Clay was better at keeping the mask on than he was in the last season.
Yes, it's like once they see it come off, they can't unsee it, I guess.
But the mask is also his problem. That's his breaking point. He needs to, he's got to get out of there or kill himself. It's a horrible way to put it.
It's dark, but
earlier in the show, none of that person is real, and that's just who he's been trying to be his whole life, and it's not working. It shows that it's just not working for him.
Yeah, you could say that's the case for a lot of people in the show. Like, they have, a specific image that they put forward.
It's interesting, because Bendy, I feel her and Clay have some really interesting parallels where both of them present kind of this idealized version of, for Bendy, it's femininity, and for Clay, it's masculinity, but neither of them really connect to it when they're alone.
It really is all this front of what they want other people to see. Like, I'm gonna pull out my my women's studies minor that I wasn't able to finish, but that I did take a bunch of classes for. Judith Butler talks a lot about gender performance, and I think that's very applicable to characters like Clay and Bendy. Clay wants everyone to believe that he's this masculine, straight, powerful man. He's the mayor. He's someone to be respected. So he puts on a performance for the public. He wears these very clean suits. They're more more neutral colors. It's nothing too flamboyant like his blue suit in Help. Like he does something that portrays like a clean masculine image. He slicks his hair back so it's very clean and nothing's out of place. Like he's putting forward the image he wants people to see, and he does this with his study as well. Like he has all these taxidermy animals, and the study has a lot of dark colors, things that exude masculinity, and that's part of his performance. He wants everyone to see the thing that he wishes he was, because if he was this very macho masculine straight man, his life would be a lot easier. He wouldn't feel all this turmoil. He wouldn't have to put on that mask. Like having that mask on like puts him in kind of like this pressure cooker where like it's getting worse and worse over time until he reaches his breaking point in nature. He can't do it anymore. Like that performance is not something sustainable for him. It's so opposed to who he is at his core. And Bendy is like a similar, I would say less extreme case, but similar. You know, she projects this hyper feminine kind of sexy image to the public, and at home she's a lot more modest and childish, and there's just this dissonance there. So Clay is like the more obvious example, but we see it with Bendy as well, that performance of femininity that men are that appeals to men in public, and then something else in private that's more for her.
We got a lot of comments relating to Nurse Bendy, and we're glad that people can open up about that and talk about how she resonates with them, because she's really, her portrayal is really great, and I do feel like it was a powerful portrayal.
And we're really happy that our comment section can be a safe space for people to open up about that and connect with other people who have been through that. That's really that was really unexpected, and we're really happy about that.
Yeah, it's really great to see so much reaction already. Like when we're so new as a channel, it's really it means a lot, obviously, because we're putting a lot into this. And I know I wasn't on that last video, but it's really awesome to see the reaction to the work that was put into it and all these thoughtful
You were
discussions.
a video editor. You did all the clips.
Yeah, I did the little goofy editing.
Yeah, you really did a good job with that.
Oh, thanks. Oh my god.
There were a few comments that like pointed out your editing, like when you synced up our laughs with the Clay and Art laughing in the one scene.
I tried to sync up like a few things because I think it's fun. It keeps me occupied while I'm doing it. It's funny.
Yeah.
So we have a comment saying, "Am I insane, or aren't giraffes known for being gay?" Well, Miss Chaotic Kitty, turns out they are. Giraffes are very much known for being gay.
The more you know.
Male giraffes are known to engage in homosexual behavior more frequently than heterosexual behavior. Often, studies have found that up to 94% of mounting incidents between giraffes are between males.
Can we just talk
and
about
this is not because of a lack of females. They just like doing that.
Can we talk about the insanity of the term necking? Like, have you necked today?
The gentle rubbing of necks. Well, necking is actually more like fighting.
For Clay that would be.
I mean, they bring their necks at each other, and then when they're done fighting, they're like, "Yeah, you want to do something?"
That's Clay code.
That's so Clay.
Yeah, we both in agreement on that.
No wonder Clay resonates with giraffes.
Literally,
they're gay. They like to pick some fights.
That's his persona.
Yeah. Yes.
Like I know we dog on Wolf Clay, but like that's his persona. It's a giraffe.
Yeah. Yeah. He really relates.
We got another one here. This kind of discourse is what makes this silly-looking claymation real art. The fact that it is truly so disturbing, the fact that it elicits this disgusted reaction is the whole point. God's Chef is not easy to watch, and I tend to skip it, but I can't devalue it just because it's effective satire. There are people who genuinely look at the world through the lens of a Moralton citizen. That is what the creators of Moral Orel show us again and again. It's a gag, and it's hauntingly real. The show is built on subversive satire. As upsetting as it is, it's holding a mirror to the dehumanizing nature of fundamentalists towards women. This mindset seeps into and poisons us even in the most innocent and well-intentioned like Orel. God's Chef light and plainful tone is in direct contrast with the horrific reality of what has been perpetuated and what those women are expected to simply accept as part of life. That is why it's light, because the adults are all complicit in Orel's actions. They have no option but to minimize the reality of what they've created. Hit the nail on the head.
That is
Thank you.
Yeah, that's an amazing comment. Thank you so much.
I like the person who says Clay's closet is made of glass. Like, yeah,
It is.
you are correct.
Okay. I can't believe you guys didn't mention that Sculptum's rapist looks exactly like her grandfather, adding a layer of speculation that she was also abused by her own grandfather. So it's been mentioned that, you know, they tend to reuse models in the show, especially the head models. They'll take the character's head and they'll recolor it, or they'll add some aspects to it and it'll be a new character. And that's just a shorthand for them to not have to create too many different head models. But for a situation like this, there does seem to feel like there's some intentionality to it. I come from an animation background. When you are making assets for animation, somebody was hired to make that family tree for Sculptum's room, and you know, someone probably told them to use a similar head model to Creepler's, but on closer inspection, it doesn't look like the same one. His eyes look a little wider, and his face is a little rounder than Creepler's. Creepler is a little more squared off. I don't think they're the exact same head model, but they look similar enough that it feels like there's something they're implying there. Whether the implication was that she was molested by her grandfather, or maybe the implication was about familiar attraction, and that maybe Sculptum had found him attractive, had found Creepler attractive because he reminded her of her grandfather. That's also a possibility. We actually don't have enough information to make that conclusion or to, speculate on that in a lot of detail.
Yeah, but we did want to highlight it because it is like an interesting and valid theory. A comment that I like is watching this with my cat, and she's super engaged in it. Thank you.
I love that. Say hi to your cat for us. Are you going to talk about the preacher's kid? Her mom, like Orel, went behind someone's back and forced them into parenthood. Of course, the preacher never had to raise his kid because she was kept secret from him her whole life until she became an adult. Her mom just made her pregnancy out to be some kind of miraculous contraception. So we didn't want to include things in the video that weren't like directly, how do we say this?
It's okay. So like, obviously, okay. So the character is Gladys Foamwire.
Gladys Foamwire.
Obviously, what Gladys did was extremely creepy and crossed a lot of lines, and she did break into his house. So it was a crime. But
it was a crime.
But she didn't
violate him.
Assault him. She just like took some stuff. She just like took his wastebasket, which had sperm. So like it's really weird, but it's not a like it
wasn't rape.
Assault.
Yeah, no,
it wasn't.
Yeah, it was just stalking and theft of property,
which is obviously not okay.
Yeah,
she didn't force him into parenthood either, because she never made any introduction between him and his child. So, you know, I don't want to say that it's a victimless crime, because the victim was putty because she took away his wastebasket.
Yeah, it's not like she knocked on his door and was like, "Give me child support every month." Like, look what you did to me. Like, yeah.
And Stephanie even says that like all her mom was interested in was getting the sperm. to have the baby. That's all she wanted.
Equivalent of having like a sperm bank baby who you don't meet until they're an adult.
Yeah.
That's true.
Like, again, very, very weird, but not like the kind of thing that would warrant that being in our last video.
Y'all should make a podcast about this show, guys. You guys are so funny. We already are. We hope you're enjoying it.
Yeah.
But we're glad you think we're funny. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks.
Many people don't know one fact, but that makes that part of the plot even more terrifying. The ice cream man decided to rape women with certain traits because he couldn't abuse children no matter how hard he tried. They always escaped, so he decided to have children of his own to have access to them. See, this is what we're talking about when we say that you guys really sensationalize the whole lore of Moral Orel, because that was never really implied.
Yeah, I mean,
like, I think Creepler can be a pedophile and a rapist.
Yeah, I think he just checks all the disgusting boxes at once.
I forgot which Moral Orel video I heard this from, but apparently Nurse Bendy was supposed to end up with Stephanie, but then the show got canceled. Imagine if she got to explore her sexuality without feeling like she has to cater to men. So we have no source for that, and we cannot confirm it, and we have to assume that Nurse Bendy ending up with Stephanie is a myth.
I'm pretty sure it's like a popular Tumblr thing, or like online thing.
It's okay to have ships, and it's always fun, but you can't go around spreading that, oh, this was going to happen, when you have no source for it, and it's just not true.
Yeah, there's a lot of misinformation around the show, and there are some really good compilations of like actual Q&As with Dino and other creators, people who worked on the show. So that's really the best place to get information, is to read through those kind of Q&As and stuff.
I do also feel like the assumption that somehow exploring her sexuality with Stephanie would heal her. I feel like that isn't accurate to life. Bendy has very specific traumas regarding sex, and more sex isn't going to fix her.
Yeah, like her trauma isn't like a sexual orientation thing where exploring sex with a woman would be healing to her.
I think what's more important for her character is, finding her footing with her son first, and then she can take steps to move forward after that the way that she sees fit when she's able to heal.
Also, Reverend Putty and Florence really reminded me of Coercion, how he was not interested, but they ended up having schmicks. Okay, so regarding Reverend Putty and Florence, on repeat viewings of the episode, we kind of came to the conclusion that he did intentionally go to her apartment to have sex with her. And this was more a situation where, even though she wasn't the ideal partner that he wanted, he was still willing to do so because he's a cad.
Wait, what is it? Yeah. I'm sorry, what is that acronym?
No, it's not an acronym. He's a CAD, a CAD.
A computer-aided program?
Deliberate disregard for another's feelings or rights. A selfish cad.
Yep, that is cat behavior.
Yeah, like he went to her apartment with the intention of sex. Like, that's clear. Things got like a little bit derailed with Dottie being there because, he thinks Dottie's like all that. Like, obviously she's very attractive. But then, he goes into Florence's room and they, when sex is initiated, like, he's not being forced into it. Like, yes, like she like guides him to the bed, but like we see very quickly he gets into it. Yeah, it's not like he was forced into it.
They stop at one point and then he starts again. And
yeah,
I'm not saying that's not. It's
after, I think, I think he Papermouth shot off his gun. Yeah. I think that was it.
He goes, "What's the hubbub?" He said, "What's a hubbub?" I don't think that someone who's in the throes of being assaulted would talk like that.
That was what happened. This wasn't a coercive situation. This was a very awkward, that's sometimes just how it is.
Yeah, and there's a whole other layer to it, obviously, with the stigma behind Florence's, weight and everything. So I'm not going to get into that right now, but yeah, that is a factor as well.
Yeah, but like she's kind of like this woman that's not very desired because of her weight. Everyone in Morrilton like places some kind of morality on her weight. And she's got this huge crush on him, so that makes things a little awkward. And then Putty's like a virgin, a very desperate virgin.
It was just two very awkward people. Like, is really how I would boil that down.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so, conclusively, not rape.
Yeah, just a really awkward sexual encounter.
Yep.
God gave Nurse Bendy the son that the men of God gave Nurse Bendy the son that the men of Morrilton deserve. And you know what? You're right, Blender Banana. You are so correct. I thought Clay was bi. He has a relationship with Miss Censordoll that he does get pleasure from. You want to take this one, Ellie?
I think the answer I want to give is that we are going to talk about this in a later video. We have a lot of really carefully thought out points about why Clay is gay and not bisexual. But I think what I'll say for now is that what a lot of these points boil down to is that the tragedy of Clay's character, kind of like all of his internal conflicts that are so important and really make him who he is as a character, are like so tied to him being gay. And if you read him as bisexual and as being someone who is attracted to women romantically and sexually, it really takes away from like his character and the arc that he goes through in the show. Like, so much of his pain is tied to being forced into this role that is not comfortable for him. He is, being with women hurts him. And if he was bisexual, it wouldn't be the same. Like, it's, getting kind of long-winded here, but it's like him being gay is and being exclusively attracted to men is just really something at the core of his character. And we will expand on all of the reasons why in our Clay analysis, which is going to be an upcoming video. So I promise we'll have a very detailed argument for that then.
And we will talk in depth about the whole thing he has with Censordoll and why it doesn't make him bisexual. You should have led with the fact that this was not a kid's show. Scared the crap out of me. I was like, what are we teaching these kids? And wondering if this was the same boring kids show my parents made me watch. Thank you for giving me a jump scare so bad I'm set for Halloween. Thank you, that one person, 1245. We got a good laugh out of your comments.
This one's my favorite.
You're our favorite commenter right now. You're commenter of the week.
This one really, we got a lot out of this one. This was great.
Yeah.
What the fuck? I literally watched the show. When did this happen? And then a few minutes later, replied to yourself saying, never mind. It was David and Goliath.
I guess I fooled you.
Also, don't be rude. So hard. Please don't be rude to each other in the comments. Just move on if something makes you laugh.
Oh, I also want to just point out a comment we got on our first video, because we got kind of an influx of viewers because of how well our second video did. Someone commented on our first video that this was a rare let's start a podcast W. And that's maybe one of the greatest compliments we've ever gotten.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. I think one of the messages of the show is that when you suppress the natural sexual impulses, you are pushed into perversion, because the sex drive is the most powerful drive a human has, and suppressing it actually just deforms it. This is a great point, because I think even like without considering rape culture, this is really prevalent in most of the characters. This is prevalent in Gladys Foamwire and in Danielle, and you know, it messes you up to have to suppress yourself. So yeah, that's a really astute observation.
Yeah. We got this really awesome comment about chemical dependency with alcoholism and the phenomenon of tolerance. This was so informative. Like it really educated us on the topic, and I think provides a lot of insight into clay, especially in nature. So, like, thank you for this comment.
This is just speculation based on personal experience and background in chemical dependency treatment, but I think the more likely explanation for clay no longer feeling the euphoric effects of the alcohol is the phenomenon of tolerance. For those unfamiliar with the concept, tolerance refers to the way the body adapts when someone consumes significant amounts of alcohol on a regular basis. As a result, the individual needs to consume increasing quantities to get the same effects. The biggest clue being, one, he's been drinking to excess since he met Liberta. Going off Orel's age, he has been doing this for at least 10 years. Such individuals tend to have a significant level of tolerance. I've routinely seen people come into detox with a 0.30 blood alcohol content or higher. For reference, normal individuals start suffering from alcohol poisoning at this level, and 0.35 starts producing coma. People who blow over a 0.30 on admission to the treatment facility were automatically sent to the hospital for several days, even if they were still conscious. He specifically states stopped working, which likely refers to the effects of alcohol in general, not just this instance on the trip. The sedation and numbing effects are a first the person develops tolerance to. The specific mechanisms of alcohol tolerance are too complicated to go into in a YouTube comment, but in general, repeat exposure causes changes to metabolic pathways, neurotransmitter production, and the number of and sensitivity of receptors for neurotransmitters, and even alters gene expression. Thank you so much for correcting us. We always appreciate that.
Very insightful way too, like very detailed.
Yeah, like we started this channel because we want to try to provide education and insight onto the show and all of its more complex aspects, but we also really appreciate people teaching us things in the comments. Like this was really awesome. We appreciate it a lot. There is one last one I do want to highlight really quickly. It was on one of our community posts. Someone just commented repent. we did get a good laugh out of that. So thank you.
Wait, is this new?
No, it was I think it was on the 666.
Yeah.
Oh, right. Wait, I remember there was one more comment that I wanted to address.
Please. Yeah.
Hot take, I am glad they ended it at 3 seasons. The original plan was to make Miss Censordoll a literal witch who cast a spell on Clay to make him shoot Orel. I think that would rob the show of its legendary moment. Also, I'm a fan of the supernatural elements of the show, like the zombies. I think the show is better the more grounded it is. Once we bring up witches with superpowers that make the bad characters do the bad things they do, it kind of ruins it for me. See, I don't see it that way. I feel like Miss Censordoll being a puppet who somehow finds this cheat code to get some sort of, I don't know, like minor control over other puppets. That kind of fascinates me in like a metaphysical sense. I feel like that would have been an interesting way to break the fourth wall, since they're already doing it with this act of having the characters do stop motion. And the fact that she kind of does that in one of the scrapped end credit scenes, that's interesting to me. I think it would have been very cool to see her actually being a witch. I don't think this would have robbed Clay of his agency. I think he still would have done what he'd done, but I think maybe her role would have been just kind of gently edging things the way she wants them.
A very Censordoll thing to do.
Yeah, and I think, whether or not she is a witch, because where the show ended, you can interpret it either way you want. I think what's more important for me is just the way her character manipulates other people, because there are a lot of people in real life that are incredibly manipulative and do try to, harm other people by, trying to sway them one way or another for their own personal gain. And, Censored Doll has a lot of her own personal motives that she's driven by, and it benefits her to manipulate other people to do things that will get her towards what she wants. And that's something we'll discuss in a later video, but I think that aspect of it as well is important to consider.
Yeah, and it could have been more metaphorical too. Like, we really don't know how that was planned. Like, when you hear something like in short term like that, like oh, this was a thing that could have happened, we really don't know what the details behind it could have been. Like, let it cook, you know?
I feel like what you're saying is that you don't trust the writer, and what we're saying is that we trust the writer.
Yeah, we do.
So that's, yeah. Thank you so much for, all the subscriptions and follows. We really didn't expect to get this kind of response on, our channel. We really kind of started it as a hobby, and it's still kind of a hobby.
We're glad, there are people out there that are as invested in this as we are. We really do love this show, and we put a lot of time and effort and care into making these analyses. And we spend a lot of time just like chatting with each other, talking about, all the things we love about the show, and like just making like silly jokes about like the characters and stuff. And we really do have just such a passion for it. So it's really awesome to see there are other people out there that care as much as we do, and to see people in the comments who said that, they've never really seen this show, or maybe they've only seen a couple episodes and now they're interested in watching. So that's really special for us.
Speaking of which, if you haven't seen the show yet and this is your first introduction to it, we recommend that you go watch the show.
Yeah, please.
Because it'll heighten your enjoyment of what we're talking about, and what we're talking about will heighten your enjoyment of the show. Don't let other people experience things for you, and don't experience things secondhand. It's a fantastic cartoon. You'll find under our channel, under playlists, you can watch the show. There's a compilation of all 7 episodes of it, 7 hours of it. It's got way more than 7 episodes. But everything's in there. There's it all in one video. There's it in chronological order. And I had to throw Satan in there because they forgot to put it in the first video. But yeah.
You can't miss that one. That's a good one.
Cannot miss Satan. Satan is a great episode. But yeah, you should go watch Moral Orel once you finish this video, if you haven't seen Moral Orel yet.
It's free, guys. It's free. FREE free.
Absolutely amazing TV, animation or not. It's just one of the best shows I've seen. So.
And if you have watched the show and you are a huge fan, you can find another playlist under our playlist page called the Team Orel Interviews. Team Orel is a website run by a collector who does this incredible job of preserving pieces of the show, a lot of which were, kind of scattered all over after the cancellation. So, he collects them and he interviews people who worked on the show. He has an interview with the voice of Blaberta, Britta Phillips, and one with Carolyn Lawrence, the voice of Orel, as well as David Tuber, one of the directors and story artists of the show. So we also have that under a playlist. Definitely subscribe to Team Orel and check out their website.
Oh, also one more thing. There's an Instagram account called Orel's Travels. It's run by someone who has like an actual Orel like doll or puppet or whatever, and it's so cute.
Yeah,
it's really fun. Orel just, they take the doll to different places and take a picture, and they do like in character captions, and they'll like respond to comments in character too. It's so cute. I love it.
If you comment at the right time, Orel will tell you he loves you. Our channel, remember to like and subscribe if you like what you're hearing. We love the show and we love to talk about it, and we're going to continue to do that until we get bored, or never.
Yeah,
hopefully never.
Till ever and ever. We'll be on our deathbeds like, hey guys, okay, we're going to have to end the channel now. We died. Oops. And Moral Oral still won't have a season 4.
Okay.
Do you know if you're out there?
We got 1,000 subscribers in a week, so that's what you could be looking at. 1,000 subscribers in a week.
That's your audience.
Yep.
Moral Oral season 4. Let's go.